for physicians, with a mission to improve global healthcare. Our goal is simple: to help healthcare professionals around the world make informed decisions, enhance critical thinking, and excel under pressure, especially in high-stakes, critical, and emergency situations. WICCM offers comprehensive training and resources in critical care and emergency medicine, featuring a core curriculum that covers adult and pediatric care, with courses in pulmonary, cardiovascular, and neurology specialties. From advanced training in emerging techniques to hands-on experiences in critical care, life support, and emergency medicine, our programs are designed to equip you with the skills needed to thrive in demanding environments. Our expert faculty, who offer lectures, mentorship, and innovative insights through annual conferences and webinars. With our online learning platform, you can access courses, workshops, and a rich library of resources from anywhere in the world, making education accessible no matter your location. WICCM also provides certifications and CME credits to support your professional growth and ensure you stay at the forefront of the field. We also foster a global community of healthcare professionals dedicated to advancing the field and improving patient care worldwide, especially in resource-limited settings. Join us at World Institute of Critical Care and Emergency Medicine, where we empower you to make a lasting impact in healthcare. Welcome to the World Institute of Critical Care and Emergency Medicine, a non-profit educational organization built by physicians for physicians, with a mission to improve global healthcare. Our goal is simple: to help healthcare professionals around the world make informed decisions, enhance critical thinking, and excel under pressure, especially in high-stakes, critical, and emergency situations. WICCM offers comprehensive training and resources in critical care and emergency medicine, featuring a core curriculum that covers adult and pediatric care, with courses in pulmonary, cardiovascular, and neurology specialties. From advanced training in emerging techniques to hands-on experiences in critical care, life support, and emergency medicine, our programs are designed to equip you with the skills needed to thrive in demanding environments. Our expert faculty, who offer lectures, mentorship, and innovative insights through annual conferences and webinars. With our online learning platform, you can access courses, workshops, and a rich library of resources from anywhere in the world, making education accessible no matter your location. WICCM also provides certifications and CME credits to support your professional growth and ensure you stay at the forefront of the field. We also foster a global community of healthcare professionals dedicated to advancing the field and improving patient care worldwide, especially in resource-limited settings. Join us at World Institute of Critical Care and Emergency Medicine, where we empower you to make a lasting impact in healthcare.
So, good evening, dear colleagues and professors, or good morning according to your time region. I think most of us in the evening time, but some of us are in the morning time. This is our third webinar regarding the respiratory critical care fellowship. I hope you enjoy our last two webinars. Today we will have two pioneers in the field of mechanical ventilation education, Dr. Ariel Guerrero from Cleveland, and his contribution in the mechanical ventilation field is very obvious, and actually we will talk about a very important topic today. And Dr. Yasser Sadiq Nassar from Cairo University, my professor. Actually, he is my senior and my professor. I would hand the microphone to him to introduce the session, and Dr. Ariel Garinero.
Hello, everyone. It's an honor and a pleasure for me today to co-host this. I hope it will be wonderful for all of you. Ariel, of course, maybe you all follow him on LinkedIn, and his very intimidating graphics, and so we chose him today to talk about the. I think it's very important for all of us who are practicing intensive care medicine, because when you talk about the competency of anyone who's practicing, you must have now as a benchmark competency for you to be able to apply to practice all the modes of ventilation. And in invasive or non-invasive ventilation, you should identify, you should classify, you should compare and contrast all these modes of ventilation. If you don't know how to classify them, you will get, as you will see with Ariel, it's a total mess if you don't have a taxonomy or a classification system in your brain. Like or of course you might know, like, for example, it's just the name. If you have a pressure support ventilation, it's just the name. This is a name for it can be a commercial name, but if you have a TAG for it, or a tag, that attributable grouping for it, it will be something like CSP with a small s, for example. It will have, this is the classification that is scientific. Like you might have something with the same tag, all the modes of ventilation that you think have a trade name, like PRVC, VC plus, VC with AutoFlow, or VG. They are all might have the same tag or the same taxonomic attributable grouping. So I hope this might refresh your practice, and I welcome Ariel, and I hope it will be not be just once, and I hope it will be a routine to take the first-hand information for him. Everybody, you have a Q&A here. The chat is not open, so if you have anything to ask, you can use the Q&A.
Okay, am I ready to start sharing my screen?
Yes, I think you can start sharing.
Okay, let me open my presentation and. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Thank you very much for giving me the chance of presenting for you guys. It's really an honor and a pleasure to be able to share with you my view of what I experiment every single day at bedside when I go to work into the ICU. Actually, I'm a respiratory therapist, and I work 12 hours per shift ventilating patients in the real ICU. All my presentations are mostly based on my experience. My experiences, I obviously experiment while working on the ICU. My goal for today is, I always say that I'm not a teacher, and I don't pretend to teach you anything to anybody of you, because you are very clever physicians, very clever minds. The only thing that I'm going to pretend to do is try to induce some thought. If we can start questioning certain things that we have learned in a certain way, that can induce some positive change. But overall, whatever I say, try to analyze it and only accept it if it makes sense to you. I call this presentation the mechanical ventilation terminology, the modern tower of Babel, because it seems like we all speak on different languages. It's very hard to honestly to understand the way we talk the way we communicate in the mechanical ventilation world. Before I proceed, it's very important, this disclaimer. I have to state that the opinions expressed here are solely my own and do not reflect the views, policies, or positions of my employer, any affiliated organizations, or any co-author for my past publications. I don't know if you've ever seen the movies when you're seeing the astronauts and something is going wrong in the space. They usually call Houston and they say, Houston, we have problems. And really, at this present time in the mechanical ventilation world, we are having a lot of problems. If you guys, I'm pretty sure you surf, you read a lot of publications, and if you read something about mechanical ventilation, you're gonna see that we have really a hard time comparing studies due to the different terminology used to describe and define modes by the authors. You can go to conferences and every speaker names the modes and use terminology according to the machines they use and the way they were educated. Also, we trust and rely on the ventilator user manuals, and sometimes it seems to be by persons that they are really far away from bedside because they have poor and inaccurate description of the modes, and sometimes it seems like they didn't consult bedside care practitioners to be sure if what they publish is really representative of the modes they use. And most of the time, honestly, they are full of errors and wrong terminology. Also, we have a problem with educational programs. There is no standard way or generic and updated way or approach to teach mechanical ventilation. In the US, we have respiratory therapists that attend to respiratory school, and they are instructed about mechanical ventilation. Physicians, on the other side, they don't have a formal training during medical school, but they get the training during the residency. Sometimes that training is not conducted in any uniform way in all the hospitals, and sometimes it is conducted by physicians that learn with the old technology, and they carry terminology that is not representative of the present technology, terminology that could be inaccurate or really outdated. This publication, which is a systematic review, is facing one of the problems I described before, and the author is saying that the major difficulty in undertaking this review was the lack of consistency throughout the literature when it came to naming and defining all the different modes of ventilation use. As you can see, when you have to compare a study and those are doing reviews, they are really having a hard time trying to understand the way other authors are describing and defining modes. Mechanical ventilation has suffered tremendous evolution in 60, 70 years. In 1950, we had machines that were very rudimentary, had mechanical parts. Artists used to assemble, disassemble, cleaning parts and put them back together. And the modes that were offered by the machines were very poor to interact with the patient. Some of the modes, they didn't have the capacity to be, how can I say, coordinated with the patient effort. They didn't have PEEP. Later on came the PEEP. SIMB was developed by altering the circle and inducing a hole. Later on came the proportional valves. So most starting evolving. And now in 2026, after 50 years, the evolution of technology has been tremendous. And thank God for us that we have better modes, better machines, much more responsive. We make ventilation easier for the patient. But at the same time, technology has evolved so fast that we have vents that looks like really like black magic boxes because it's really hard to understand the modes they offer. All the problems, I mean, when I describe the tremendous advancement in technology, that is really something wonderful for us. But sadly, there were some bad things that came accidentally associated with those things. And one of them was that in 1950, we got only 4 manufacturers and we only have few modes. Now in 2026, we have manufacturers have grown probably 10 times. And all these people want to make profit. They want to sell their machines. They want to generate revenue. So they have to start competing with many other machines. And in order to make their machines more attractive, more nice to be sold, they are creating a bunch of different names, commercial names for modes. Some of them, they look cryptic, weird, and the bad part is that there is no regulatory agency watching over the modes they create. So at present time, the world of mechanical ventilation seems to be full of different commercial names. It's not bad if we have much better modes or a lot of modes. The problem is like we have much more commercial names than actual modes available. So for somebody that works with one machine, this wouldn't be any problem. But sometimes when I went on my vacation time in South America, I visited an ICU and I could count 10 different mechanical ventilators from different manufacturers. Can you imagine all these problems that this person have, or the problem that somebody that do transport, or somebody that goes from ER transported to the ICU, to the CT scan, or to different places in the hospital, and they are using different kind of mechanical ventilators. It's hard to try to understand the modes they offer. So at this present time, we are overloaded by the terrible amount of the commercial names we have. Another important problem was that technology advanced much faster than any kind of educational mean to describe it. So at present time, we have modes very advanced that the bedside care practitioner hardly understand how they work. So I usually say that RTs or bedside care practitioners develop something that I call faith. Faith means that I have faith that the mode is working properly and doing the correct thing, because I don't have the proper understanding of how it works in order to monitor when it's not working properly. And the worst part was that some people that let's say during daytime, they're ventilated in a very advanced mode, like I would say ASV on IntelliVent ASV, and the night shift person doesn't know how IntelliVent ASV works. Is going to do the most logical aspect, that is changing the mode to a mode they are more used and more familiar with. And the problem is like we need to improve the education in order to be at the level and understand the technology. What I described before is that people that at this present time are being giving talks or writing books, they were instructed on the 70s when they were students, later on residents and specialists. And these persons, they might carry with them terminology that is outdated or it is incorrect with the present technology. It would be nice if all the, I would say, physicians, respiratory care practitioners can reevaluate with an open mind the way they have been instructed, and being able to analyze different ways of understanding modes. And if they make sense to them, try to change their approaches into a better mode, because otherwise we are carrying and we are propagating to other wrong terminology or outdated terminology. When I refer to manuals, in the hospital where I work at this present time, we try to introduce or to make the mode offered by the ServoU auto mode to be used more by the bedside care practitioners. In order to do that, we needed to understand how the mode works. And the first place where we went to get information was the manual. The manual of the servo provided really a poor information. We believe that the minimum respiratory rate was the one we set on the ventilator. And when we started using the ventilator at bedside, we found that the ventilator most of the time displayed lower respiratory rates than the one we were expecting that could be the minimum. In a certain way, we observed an unexpected lower hypoventilation because of that. So we started researching, and we finally we put auto mode. We researching in detail in order to try to explain it to the RT, and we updated the way the mode works, because the manual really didn't do the manual did a poor job telling us how auto mode works. We have to go and test and I try to go deeper to explain to our RTs how auto mode works. And that's something that every single bedside care practitioner should do, because don't trust, sometimes try to test the modes by yourself and see if the information in the manuals is correct. Because sometimes vents at bedside can do weird things, especially certain modes. Besides giving us all those great variation of commercial names, we have certain manufacturers that are introducing wrongly defined names for modes, like the mode PRVC, PRVC in the servo U and PRVC in the Nihon column. The acronym PRVC stands for Pressure Regulated Volume Control. When I expect that a machine controls volume, it means that the flow, the inspiratory flow, is preset. When I see this mode and VC, and I put it in, I test the mode, and even if we don't analyze the mode in a patient, I can see clearly at first sight that the control variable is not volume, but is pressure. So the manufacturer is wrongly coining a mode under PRVC, which clearly the control variable is not volume, but it is pressure. We can see in this graphic that you can see the flow waveform is typical with exponential decay on the second one of a mode that controls the pressure and not the volume. Also, which is funny, is that we have different commercial names for modes that in essence, they work with the same working principle. PRVC on the servo U, AutoFlow on the Traeger, APV-CMB on the Hamilton C6, and BC Plus on the Nellcore Puritan Bennett 980. They are different commercial modes, but they represent the same working principle. And I'm pretty sure that there are much more modes out there, like volume guarantee. So all these different modes represent the same working principle. Can you imagine somebody working with different bends that they have to deal with all these inaccuracies, different modes? This is a real source for potential errors. Rob Chadbourne in 2014 went over 30 different ventilators, and he found 290 different commercial names. But when he analyzed all those names, he realized that there were only 45 modes with different working principle. You can see 290 different modes, and only 45 are really different modes. It seems like there is much more modes that share the same principle and different commercial names. So this is kind of weird, and we need to find ways to get away from this, I would say, unnecessary confusion. We also have the mode PRVC that is offered on the servo U, and it's also offered on the Nihon Koden 330. So usually when I see a name, PRVC, the first thing that comes to my mind and to everybody, if it has the same name, it must be the same mode. Well, it happens that they are not the same mode. We can see these graphics. On the right side, we have the servo U. Let me get my pointer. We can see the servo U here, and we see that the mode is a mode that is a pressure control mode composed of mandatory breath with an adaptive targeting scheme. We say that at target tidal volume, the machine will self-adjust in the pressure control, trying to deliver the set tidal volume. Every single breath triggered by the machine or by the patient is going to be a mandatory breath. It's going to be triggered by the machine or the patient. Is going to be cycled by the machine because of inspiratory time has elapsed. On the other side, we have a mode in which the first breath is mandatory and the other ones are spontaneous, and suddenly a mandatory one. So this mode introduced mandatory breath and transition to a spontaneous breath. They both share the same targeting scheme. They are both adaptive pressure controllers, but the Nihon, clearly, even if they have the same name, is working at it has the same working principle that the mode on the V60 called AVAPS, and the mode on the servo U called auto mode PRVC to volume support. Introduces mandatory and spontaneous breath, both has the trying to deliver the same target tidal volume, but clearly these are not the same modes. And for everybody, I always say, don't trust on the name of the modes. You need to trust on whatever you see. So if the mode says something, but the functionality of the mode is not matching the mode, there are great chances that the name is not properly defined, or somebody activating certain kind of option and change the mode. this is related to what I was describing before. When I want to choose a mode, I go into the main pane panel for choosing modes of every single ventilator. This is a Hamilton C6. This is a Servo U. Or when I want to change a mode, I select auto mode here, or dual PAP, or SCCMB. Well, it happens that ventilators have much more modes, some of them, than the modes they really offer on the panel screen. And this happens because they offer certain kind of options that when they are activated, they change the base mode into a different one. For example, the Servo U in the mode volume control, when you select the flow shapes, has a little square with a convexity on top, which is named adaptive flow. If you activate it, it's really a change of mode, and the capacity of the mode is going to be much more than it had before. When we go to the Draeger, the mode volume control, we activate AutoFlow, and AutoFlow change this mode. It gives a totally different capacity than before. We're going to see the graphics on the next slide. On the Hamilton C6, on the mode PSIMB+, you activate an option called Pysync, and this option is literally a change of mode. And the king of all these things is the AVIA. You got pressure assist control, you can activate flow cycle and change the mode. You got pressure assist control, you activate assure volume, and it's going to be changing the mode. And volume assist control plus Vsync changes the mode. In reality, the capacity of the original mode has changed into a different one. That's why we say that it's an undercover change of mode. The worst case scenario is not that you activated an option and the mode has changed, it's that the screen is still displaying the previous mode, which is not anymore, which functionality is not anymore. So we go on the Servo U and we got volume control. This is the option flow activation, and you see that now it's activated, but the vent doesn't give me any clue that there is the option is activated. It's still displaying flow control. So if you see weird things, sometimes you need to start looking into the controls to see what happened, what was activated, because clearly the name displays in the vent is misleading us into thinking that there is a mode while it's not. On the Draeger, we see very big the name volume assist control, and good thing that this vent display AutoFlow. AutoFlow was activated on top of volume assist control, but volume assist control is still displayed very big when the mode is not anymore volume assist control. Also, we have the example of PSIMB on the Hamilton. When we activate Pysync, we change the mode, and the name of the mode still displays PSIMB+. And the Vela, we activated assure volume and pressure assist control, and still it displays pressure assist control. I don't know if this icon is giving us a clue that the mode has been changed, but it's still very big. It's the previous mode that is not the mode anymore. This is an example of the Draeger, which initially was on volume assist control. And we activated AutoFlow. When we activated AutoFlow here, we changed the control variable from being volume to being pressure now. And the targeting scheme changed from being a set point to being an adaptive pressure control. Now, the mode doesn't have the flow waveform selected anymore of a typical volume control mode. Now it looks like a pressure control mode, and the mode has the capacity to adjust the pressure up and down, trying to deliver the total volume. This is probably one of the most weird changes when you activate the extra flow. In any regular volume control mode, the goal of the machine is to deliver the total volume with a set profile of the flow waveform you selected. If the patient wants more or less flow, the machine is not going to give it to them. Some people call it flow starvation, and we call it now work shifting. The moment we activate this option, the vent has the capacity to identify when the patient needs more flow and switches the control variable from volume to pressure and liberates the flow to give the flow the patient is needed. If later on the flow decays, it continues a volume control. I'm going to display later on several graphics, but you can see that even when this is activated, the mode is still called volume control. No clue that that option was activated. The same happened for the Hamilton C6. The mode was on PSIMB+, and the option Pysync was off. This mode PSIMB plus is what we popularly know as a pressure control SIMB plus pressure support. We can see mandatory breaths and some spontaneous between the mandatory breaths. So the moment we activate Pysync, the mode that before that we classified as SIMB and a form of IMB type 1, it changes into a mode called IMB that has a breathing sequence of IMB type 2. We change the mode, and now every single we see a mandatory breath, and we see spontaneous breath. The appearances of spontaneous breath abolishes the mandatory breaths, and as long as the patient keeps on breathing, you are not going to see any mandatory breath. In a regular pressure SIMB with a rate of 12, after 5 seconds from the beginning of the mandatory breath, we should have seen a mandatory breath here, and we don't see it here. But the event still display the name PSIMB plus. I remember that I posted in social media this image, and people came like crazy at me, like saying, "Hey, what you guys are still using the old SIMB? That's obsolete. Nobody's using SIMB anymore." And usually I say that trap, because the trap is like people are unable, they judge the mode based on the name display on the screen. Because if you know about modes and you can see the screen, you're going to realize that the behavior of this mode is not the typical of an SIMB. The mode has changed. That's why it is very important every single professional can assess the screen and detect with something is not working as the name of the mode is displaying. Now, to add more gasoline to the fire, we're going to talk about pressure reference points. This is a very nice topic. We all agree that PEEP is referenced from the baseline pressure, 0 atmospheric pressure. So most of the ICU vents are the Hamilton C6 and the Servo-U. In invasive and non-invasive mode, they do a very good job because the pressure they report, the level of pressure control, pressure support, or inspiratory pressure, is taken from the level of PEEP. In a certain way, the driving pressure, the pressure is going to be driving inspiration, is going to be taken from the new baseline level created by PEEP, which is going to be 5. So the total PEEP we're going to see is 19 here in this 5 from 14, 19. Here is 5 times 10, 15, 5 times 10, 16. So we know that this pressure is the real pressure driving inspiration. The Servo-U has the control more clear when they state that the level of pressure is taken on top of PEEP. These 10 are on top of whatever level of PEEP you set. And pressure support is taken from the level of PEEP of 8. Pressure support is taken from 10. This is very nice because we need to understand that the equation of motion takes how pressure elevates from the baseline pressure, which is the pressure at the end of inspiration, of the end of expiration. On the other side, we have the Nihon column. The Nihon column is kind of weird because we got the mode, although it's a non-invasive machine, we got the mode spontaneous pressure support, let's say pressure support. And in this case, we got a PEEP of 5 and pressure support of 10, making a total PIP of peak inspiratory pressure of 15. That means that the 10 of pressure support, the pressure that drives inspiration, is taken from 5. Later on, we switch the mode to ST, spontaneous time mode, which is the equivalent of auto mode, pressure control, pressure support. And we see PEEP is 6. We have, it's called EPAP, and IPAP is 20, but now the PEEP is 20. That means that the driving pressure is not the 20, but it is 14. So the same vent is taking 2 different reference points for the pressures in the same mode. Spontaneous is only pressure support, but ST is composed of mandatory and spontaneous. It's like pressure control and pressure support, but now the pressure support are taken from the 0 baseline and not from the PEEP level. We also go to the pressure control, which is a mandatory mode, and we see that the IPAP is 12 and the EPAP is 6, but the total pressure is 13. Again, the pressure driving inspiration is going to be 12 minus 16. So the same mode has different approaches. We need to be very careful when we switch machines. For example, if we are ventilating in the emergency department or invasive and we intubate somebody, or when we extubate somebody, we're gonna use non-invasive, because we can cause that the pressure we use is going to be too excessive or too low, or maybe somebody call you to report the settings the patient is using, and suddenly they don't realize where those baselines are referenced from. That's another reason for us to be to pay attention to the vent screen, just to realize the difference and what is the real driving pressure. I would say the pressure driving inspiration. So if you have a screen, you can easily identify the pressure. But if you don't have a screen, it's going to be a real problem. And this is a source for real potential errors that could be prevented if we all agree on using the same reference point. This is one of the worst cases. In this case, in this model, which is called, I think, is SIMB pressure control plus pressure support. We can see that the pressure support, it has a PEEP of 6 and a level of 16 is taken from the level of pressure support. But the pressure control is taken from the 0. So we can see that here we got inspiratory pressure of 26 and pressure support of 10. So the spontaneous pressure of pressure support is referenced from PEEP, is taken from PEEP, while the inspiratory pressure is taken from 0. The real pressure here driving inspiration on this spontaneous breath is going to be 10, while here it's going to be 26 minus 6 is going to be 20. So why the same machine on the same mode is using a different reference point? This is clearly a recipe for disaster. The ECRI, Emergency Care Research Institute, on 2016 listed the 10 top technology hazards, and there is the number 9 is concerning mechanical ventilation. Failure to appropriate operate intensive care ventilators can result in preventable ventilator-induced lung injuries. And you can read here that one of the factors they are listing is factors that contribute to inadequate implementation of safer and more effective ventilation include lack of continuing education on the best practices for patient ventilation. And what is really concerning in this presentation is insufficient understanding of complex ventilator functionality. We need more education, we need to practice, we need to put our hands on the vent and test them on simulated scenarios. And also, it concerns to the different terminology and names we have, inconsistent terminology among ventilators manufacturers, leads to potential confusion among clinical practitioners. And facilities can alleviate these issues by confirming that all staff involved with mechanical ventilation have a sound understanding of the machine they use and the modes they offer. In my personal opinion, any professional before being allowed to work with a machine at bedside must have time of simulated scenarios and time to play with the machine and build his or her relationship with the machines, because all machines are different, have different controls, and you need, when you're at bedside, it's too late to learn. You have to be very efficient playing and doing different changes. So when you get to the real thing at bedside, you're ready to work with the patient. And this is one of the worst problems we have at this present time. Social media. I try to be on social media as much as possible because it's a terrific mean to spread education, but at the same time, we get people that self-proclaim gurus in mechanical ventilation and educators that they are uploading information that is really inaccurate and wrong. Social media, there's no peer review, and those people are uploading information probably because they want to generate likes and they want to give the impression that they know what they are posting. But really, posting education in social media is really something serious, because you can spread wrong terminology, wrong concepts. So I always say that please take it seriously and verify the information before posting. If you are not secure, if you are a student and you are insecure of the things you are doing, or you're a new professional, please refrain from posting until you know the quality of the information you are uploading. And please, if some people that sometimes I try to correct people in social media and I'm pretty sure they're going to get mad, read the comments we do, because we are not trying to hurt your feelings. We are trying to prevent you, or we are trying to others learn from the kind of wrong information and outdated information you are sharing. So this is, at this present time, social media is a jungle. All what I described before is a recipe for a real perfect storm. We are waiting something bad to happen to make it worse. We got tons of modes. We don't have the proper education. We don't understand the different functionality. We have too many machines. We have literally, this is the recipe for something bad to happen. And the perfect storm happened in 2019 and slapped past all of us in the face, really very hard. Suddenly, we got much more patients. There was hysteria with COVID-19. Our patients got more complicated. The number of patients intubated started increasing. We didn't have enough machines. People started looking into ventilated 2 to 3 patients using the same machine. We started getting all machines into just get ready in case we need it. I remember seeing an old Mark 7 brought in case it was needed. Home care machines, not ventilator machine to ventilate invasively intubated patients. So not only we have at present time we have problems with different machines, but we brought a lot of different old and outdated machines, and we got short of professionals, and we started training professionals that were not used to work with mechanical ventilation. And suddenly we realized how important is to get the proper education or to develop means that can make education easier for those people that needs to be trained in mechanical ventilation. And also how much we needed means to make the understandable with all the different modes, all these pressure reference points, easier for the RT at bedside. Because we were under stress, we have too many machines, we were overworked. That's the recipe to make mistakes at bedside. Also, at this present time, and related to what I was saying before, we have a lot of wonderful different machines. And educators, let's say like respiratory therapists in the US or students in your different countries, you don't have all the machines available to teach your students. So we understand that there are some machines that are more popular than others. But if you don't know the machines your students are going to be facing, why don't you try to find a way to teach them so you can teach the foundations that make the basis of every single mode available in any machine. So your students, when they get in front of the machines, they're going to start analyzing the machine, observing the machine, and maybe with a little bit training, they're going to be able to understand the machines. So we need a way to, in a certain standard way, make education more ample and teaching the basic thing for all the modes. And in my personal opinion, the taxonomy of the modes is the best teaching tool developed so far. I'm not pro taxonomy of the modes because I'm close to the people that develop it. As a matter of fact, I think that the taxonomy of the mode has great things. It's not perfect as any taxonomy is always evolving, but I'm not convinced because I know the people. I'm convinced the taxonomy works because it makes sense in my head. And because it makes sense in my head, and whatever is postulating refers to the engineering principle, the right definitions, the updated definitions, because in my mind, taxonomy has made me understand, has make it easier for me to understand the behavior of different modes. All what I described before is something that I describe as a snowball effect. All these problems that we have at this present time has been growing over time, and the ball is getting bigger. Unless we do something to make this problem smaller, it's going to be getting bigger every day. And we might not try to decrease the size of the ball, but we try not to make it bigger. And that, for me, that my message is that all of you who have learned mechanical ventilation in a certain way, try to open your mind and reevaluate your concepts and try to understand the concept of the taxonomy. And if they make sense to you, try to change the chip in your head and try to start teaching it to others because it's really going to make sense and going to make all the education easier. this is the mess what we have at present time. And the solution that offers the taxonomy is agreeing on correct definitions and define the mode based on how they are composed. If you go and read the publications about the taxonomy, you're going to see files attached that have any kind of lexicon or definitions of all the basis of the taxonomy, all the terminology that has been evaluated, updated, and really represent the engineering principles and physical principles upon which the taxonomy of the modes is elaborated. This is my final slide. Like I always said, artificial intelligence is coming. The problem is not going to be artificial intelligence. The problem is going to be human intelligence, because we are unable to understand our modes, and we need to make and find ways that can make our understanding of modes easier, so we can start doing less mistakes at bedside and find ways to communicate in an easier way, so we can try to avoid preventable errors. I guess that was my last slide. I don't know if there is any question or...
I think we have some questions from the audience, but some of them I think will be answered in the second part of the... We still have another 20 minutes from Ariel, I think. So they are asking about the taxonomy of the CMV mode and the difference between ACV mode and SIMV regarding the taxonomy or the grouping of the ventilator. I think we didn't reach this yet. We will go through this.
That's fine. I can address that difference on the next one, or I don't know if you want me to refer to it now or have any other question related now. I don't know how much time I spent in this presentation. Did I go over 40 minutes or 30 minutes?
No, it was nice. Actually, I think most of us are amused with this presentation. So don't.
I am sure you're stuck with us. You're stuck with us, and you must continue the series.
Yeah.
It's not going to be just 20 minutes, I'm sure.
At a certain moment, my ears got clogged, so I don't know. I kept on talking, but I couldn't hear myself very much.
No.
The next presentation, I don't know what time do you guys want me to start, but you know, I can answer the question. Can you repeat me the questions again so I can answer them now?
So they were asking about the difference between ACV mode and SIMV mode regarding the taxonomy. I think it will be answered in details. I think this will be answered in the next.
Yeah.
Am I wrong?
It will be answered, but the only thing I'm going to tell you that I made my presentation to tell you guys to stop thinking about assist control, which is assist control is a definition that's telling me that who triggers the machine is, if it is assisted, means the patient, if it is controlled, is the machine. But at the same time, in the mode SIMB, the mandatory breath could be triggered by the patient and by the machine. The real distinction is when we replace the name AC but continuous mandatory ventilations,
Yes.
and in such a way that, let's say, we classify, since we have pressure assist control and volume assist control, the tag is going to be pressure CMB or volume CMB. Whereas the distinction with SIMB, the tag is going to be pressure control IMB plus pressure support. That in that case is going to be pressure control IMB type 1. Let me see, type 1. And we have two targeting a scheme if it is pressure control, pressure support, which is S for the mandatories and S for the spontaneous. It's going to be easier on the next presentation when I refer to that. But clearly, the difference is going to be in the sequence. Assist control has a breathing sequence of CMB, and any form of IMB is going to have a sequence of IMB. CMB means that there's only mandatory breaths, the mode only going to allow mandatory breaths, versus IMB, where the mode going to allow mandatory and spontaneous breaths.
So I think we are all interested to hear the next part of the presentation. Yes, I think we can start it now. Yes, thank you very much, Ariel.
You're welcome. So do you want, can I take a break or do you want me to start right away?
We can take yes, we can take 3 minutes break. Yes, if you want. Yes, it's up to you. Yes,
Yeah,
we can take
5 minutes is fine.
Yes, 5 minutes is okay. Thank you. So we can just
Oh, let me change the presentation.
okay.
Hold on. I opened the previous one. I swear to God that this title of the Rosetta Stone was accidental. I didn't know that I was speaking with mostly people from Egypt, but that's the name I've been using even before meeting you guys.
Oh, actually, the moderators are from Egypt, but most of the attendees are not from Egypt. I can see from the names. It's just a coincidence that me and Dr. Yasser from Cairo University, but I see the names are many non-Egyptian names in the attendees.
Okay, give me just a second.
There are people from Puerto Rico, and there are people who want to ask questions for you in Spanish. Someone is saying that, can I ask Ariel in Spanish?
Yeah. Can I read the question or?
No, it's an anonymous attendee. He's asking to make a. Okay, write it in Spanish, Mr. Anonymous.
Yeah, let me see if I can read the comment because I got the whole. No, I don't see the comments, I think.
The Q&A. You have
Uh,
tons of questions, Ariel. I think you will spend the whole night answering it.
Okay, I went to the main screen now. Okay, Q&A. Yeah, I know one is a guy that I know from Colombia, Javier. A lot of people from Indonesia.
Yes. I think you stick to the answering the ones that are related to the
Yeah,
lecture. Some people ask.
I saw the question. It's about mechanical ventilation of if I see that this problem with modes is going to be improving or we're going to find a solution. I'm going to answer in English, but the problem with modes with the different commercial names is not going to improve. Sadly, there is no regulatory agency. The manufacturer is going to keep on coining whatever ugly name or mode they like. And it would be nice if they agreed to name the modes or at least to agree to reference pressure to the same lines. So since they are unable to do that or they are not willing to do that, we have to find means to try to make common grounds. For example, my main language is Spanish. You guys must speak Arabic or Egyptian Arabic, and other guys speak other languages. But at the present time, we are all communicating in English with different accent, whatever, but we are all able to communicate in English. So I think that the taxonomy could be that language that can make our communication standard, independent of whatever name manufacturer is going to create. You're going to see on the next slide that I present the classification of animals, and I put the cat is called Felis catus, and the dog is classified as dog Canis lupus familiaris.
Yes.
I don't pretend you guys to call the cat Felis catus or the dog Canis lupus familiaris. You're gonna call the cat and the dog dog.
Yes.
So whenever you work in your institution, please call them whatever name you want to use. But when you need to communicate with others, we need to find this Rosetta Stone, which is a taxonomy, to try to understand a common ground, the English, so we can understand the different modes you guys are, let's say, publishing, communicating, teaching. Otherwise, we're going to have the problem that everybody doesn't understand and is trying to guess the modes. There's nothing we can do, and since manufacturers are not going to change, we need to learn how to properly utilize the taxonomy.
Yes.
And let me tell you something. The taxonomy has evolved over the years, and there are other approaches that people has done that really, instead of making the communication easier, is really harder. I'm not going to refer to those ones, but try to be careful. In my opinion, the method that most clearly describe the control theory that events use, the proper terminology with the clear principles and engineering and physical and engineering concepts, is displayed by the taxonomy. I heard you guys talking on a previous presentation last year, talking about negative closed loop, positive closed loop control. These are concepts from control theory, from engineering, and you're going to see that the all targeting scheme are based on those concepts, and how the mode does to control the control variable, obviously, is done based on those concepts. That's why we try to limit the word control, and sometimes we use target because it seems like the word control is coming out of control and overused.
Yes. So I think we can start the second part now.
Okay, let me go to the...
And for the Arab talkers, Rosetta Stone is the Hajar Rashid in Arabic. So some people that does not got that because it's in Arabic. It's not Rosetta. It's Rashid. That's
Yeah,
it.
well, excuse my ignorance.
No. That's
I
for.
tried to find an example of something that can let us translate between the...
Very valuable in our history because it decoded the hieroglyphic language to us.
Yes,
So
that's right.
It's a
when you
very
are
known.
asking
It's very known
before that,
to every
we
Egyptian.
didn't
Yes.
know our history. So
I would say it let us decode or decipher the hieroglyphics created by the manufacturers into a more understandable language.
Yes.
Okay, ready to start? Well, let's start with the second presentation of the day, which is the taxonomy of the modes. The taxonomy of the modes is a very ample topic that I suggest you guys to go and read the publications by Rob Chadron that explain it in detail. And I prepared the first presentation for 20 minutes, which is pretty much not enough time to speak about the taxonomy. So later on, when I was told I was allowed for more time, I started adding more stuff. So I'm going to try to do my best, and hopefully another presentation could be done in the future to address the taxonomy in detail, because it's very important to understand it in order to adopt it. Again, the same disclaimer. The opinions expressed here are solely my own and do not reflect the views, policies, or position of my employer, any affiliated organizations, or any co-authors from my past publications.
Can you
That's
share
all.
the screen?
Oh, am I sharing the screen?
Not yet.
Okay, let me start from the beginning. Can you see my screen now?
Yes. Yes.
Okay,
Go on.
I just read the disclaimer. I don't have to move it again, but this is the first slide of the presentation, Taxonomy of the Mold, Rosetta Stone. We go to the disclaimer that was read already. And now we go to the second slide, which is the taxonomy of the mold. Let me see if I close this one. Okay, the taxonomy is the science of classification. In this example, we see in the animal kingdom the classification of the carnivora order, and I was interested in showing you guys the classification of the dog and the cat. The classification of the dog and the cat is done on 3 simple steps, which is the order, family, and genus. We start from a grouping day by whatever is common. We separate it on the differences until we isolate one specimen, which is the dog, and the cat, and we assign the dog a scientific name, which is usually in Latin, which is Canis lupus familiaris, and the name for the cat is Felis catus. This is resemble what we talked before. We all call the dog, and we call the cat. We don't have to use the Canis lupus familiaris name, but for those that are going to be writing in scientific publications, we need to write the proper scientific name, and that's the name that we create on the taxonomy. Hold on. I think I wasn't sharing properly. Are you guys seeing my screen now?
Yeah, I can see it clearly. Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay, because I lost it. So we talked right now before about the classification of the dog and the cat, and the taxonomy of the modes, as we're going to see on the next slide, follows pretty much the same principle. 90% of the modes could be classified on 3 simple steps, which are the control variable, the breeding sequence, and the control scheme. 4 classification criteria to go deeper in detail is going to be needed for some modes that share the same the same control variable, breeding sequence, and control scheme. And the 4 criteria is going to be like a subspecies to differentiate more of those modes. That happens in maybe 10% of the modes, but 90% of the modes could be classified based on the control variable, breeding sequence, and control scheme. Something that I forgot to tell, every single step of the classification adds letter to the acronym or to the scientific name, which we call tag or taxonomy attribute group, which you're gonna see on this slide. The scientific name of the mode, which is called taxonomy attribute group, and I'm gonna refer from now on as tag or TAG, is composed by the letters from each of the steps. Let's say the first 2 letters are the control variable. We know that only 2 control variables could be controlled during a delivery of a breath, which are volume control or pressure control. In this case, we're going to see a mode in which the control variable is pressure. When I say volume control or pressure control, it's going to be black and white because there is no other option. Later on comes the breeding sequence. The breeding sequence is telling us the types of breaths that are composed in the mold. There are 3 breeding sequences. Each of them, each acronym is made with 3 letters. One is CMV mode, where it stands for continuous mandatory ventilation. The other one is IMV, intermittent mandatory ventilation, and the next one, CSV, for continuous spontaneous ventilation. And finally, in lowercase, we're going to see the control scheme, which have a different kind of letters. S stand for set point, A for adaptive, D for dual, B for biovariable, R for servo, O for optimum, and I for intelligent. That's the control scheme. On the right side, we can see another example of the tags when the control variable is the pressure, when this the sequence CSV is continuous spontaneous and targeting scheme A, and when it's IMB type 1 and IMB type 2. So I'm going to try to explain today how the targeting schemes are made. What's the benefit of knowing the code or tag? Well, First, it allows us to easily identify the composition of a mode. Like I said, you can see the control variable, the type of breath that the mode is composed, and the targeting scheme. You're going to see how the mode is composed. And it's going to be easier than some of the names that are really very cryptic or very complicated. Also, it allows us to identify modes with different names by the same function. Although modes with a different commercial name and same function, they're going to be sharing the same tag. In a few words, same tag represents the same modes, even though they have different commercial names. It also allows us to identify modes with the same name but different functions. In this case, when the modes have the same commercial name at different tags, that means that they are not the same mode, even though they have the same name, same commercial name. It also allows to identify options that change the mode upon which they are activated. If a certain mode has a tag and you activate an option and the tag changes, that means that the mode has changed. It also allows us to recognize the mode using publications. What we were talking before, you can call the cat cat and the dog dog, but please, next to it, next to whatever name you want to put to the mode, put the taxonomy tag so we all understand and we have an easy time trying to understand the mode you use. Sadly, reviewers and some publications, they don't require this thing, but it would be nice in a future, every single publication put at least in parentheses or in a table the taxonomy tag next to the modes that were used in the research. Also, it enables education in a generic way. It's like I said before, the taxonomy principles lays the foundations that you're going to see on every single mode, wherever machine you use, invasive or non-invasive. That's a generic way to teach. The Cleveland Clinic has developed a wonderful tool which is available to be downloaded for free in your phones, Apple and Android. This great tool has all the modes, all the mechanical ventilation modes catalog, and you can open the application, start looking for the manufacturer, the mode you're looking, and the application is going to give you the tag. Just by knowing the tag, it's going to be easier for you at first to know how the mode is composed, especially when you are not familiar with certain machine, or when you have to start switching machines and you need to find the mode equivalent on the similar mode. So this is a terrific tool that I suggest you to download. It's for free and learn how to use it. It has, I would say, the majority of the modes in the US, and like always, is a application that is constantly updated and corrected in case of there is any inaccuracy. In the taxonomy of the modes, we define that there are two types of breaths, which we call mandatory and spontaneous. This type of breaths could be found composing any mode, just exclusively or combined. We can find modes that they are composed only of mandatory breaths. We can find modes that they are composed only of spontaneous breaths, and we can find modes that they are composed of a combination of both. In this case, I chose this image of a mode which popularly we know as a pressure control SIMB plus pressure support. And we can see that we have the mandatory breaths are controlled by pressure, the spontaneous breaths are in the middle. We can also have this mode in the same way, mandatory and spontaneous. In the case to be a volume control is SIMB plus pressure support. In this case, I'm just telling you now that the mandatory breaths could be controlled either by pressure or by volume. The spontaneous breaths that we can see in the middle, they are most of the time associated with pressure support. And we can see in this mode that the mandatory breath and the spontaneous breath happens in the middle of the mode. Since we get to this point, I need to define what is a mandatory breath. A mandatory breath is that one that is triggered by the machine or by the patient, but it's always cycled by the machine. It's always cycled because a time has elapsed, like in pressure control, and like in volume control, because a certain volume or time has elapsed too. Mandatory breaths is what we're going to see later on. In some modes, they are called assist control. The name mandatory breaths from now on replace the name assist control. You only have to try to make that in your mind, that whenever you hear mandatory, replace the assist control breath. Now we're going to define spontaneous breaths. Spontaneous breaths are those that are triggered and cycled by the patient. As a matter of fact, the definition of a spontaneous breath doesn't imply that you have to connect it to a mechanical ventilator, either invasively or non-invasively. Invasively, we at this present time, we are breathing spontaneously. So we decide when a breath starts, when the breath finishes, and how long it is if we don't want a breath and we want to take a side. I have to remark that the mode pressure support cycles by a percentage of peak flow, but even though we set that percentage, it's considered to be cycled by the patients because of the combination of the flow with the physiology of the airways of the patients. Since we are talking now about mandatory breaths and I chose the mode SIMB, it's funny how the presence of mandatory breaths was with us for a long time. Have you ever guys asked what means the M on SIMB? And we're gonna see that funny, the M means mandatory. The acronym is synchronized intermittent mandatory ventilation. In a certain way, we already have the concepts of mandatory breaths in the mode SIMB. If this patient gets paralyzed, we are not gonna see the spontaneous breaths anymore, but we will see the mandatory breaths because their beginning is going to be mandated by the machine based on the respiratory rate you set. So now we are talking about the breathing sequence. The breathing sequence is telling us the types of breaths that's going to be composed in a mode. Since we have two types of breaths, which are spontaneous and mandatory, we can most that could be composed only of mandatory breaths. That's going to be called continuous mandatory ventilation, or the acronym CMV. The most is going to be composed only of mandatory breaths, and no spontaneous breath going to be allowed at any time. On the other side, we got modes composed of spontaneous breaths that we call continuous spontaneous ventilation, and the acronym is going to be CSV, and only spontaneous breaths going to be present. No mandatory breaths are allowed. And the last one is the mode called intermittent mandatory ventilation, where we are going to have a combination of mandatory and spontaneous breath, even if that combination is going to be for a short period of time, and they have to be physically independent from each other. In certain modes, like APRV, spontaneous breath could happen inside the big mandatory breath, but they are not considered a form of IMB because of that. It's just because if we extend the expiratory time, spontaneous breath could happen between the mandatory breath. Now we're going to get on the part of explaining the tags. When we intubate a patient after a rapid sequence intubation, the patient is apneic. Most of the time, before intubated, I already prepare and set the ventilator. One of my co-workers, while we were intubating, is setting up the vent. And the most more usually used at bedside, they're going to be pressure control, assist control, or volume control, assist control. Some people can argue and say, well, we can use PRVC. Well, you're right, but PRVC is a part of pressure control mode, belongs to the family of pressure control mode. So I simplified by the two most more widely used, which are pressure control, assist control, and volume control, assist control. By pressure control, by choosing those two modes, I'm referring to the control variable of the modes we're going to be using. The name assist control, as I remarked before, meant that the patient could start the breath, or the machine can do it by them, can do it instead of the patient. Now we're going to replace, those are the two, settings on top of pressure control and below the mode volume control, assist control. And we're going to see that since the patient is not breathing, is apneic, we need to choose modes that are going to be delivering a minimum respiratory rate. In the case of the upper one, the rate is 12. So every 5 seconds, the patient is going to receive a pressure control of 16, and it's going to last for 1 minute, upon which it's going to be cycling. Whereas the other one, the rate of 26, is going to be more or less 2.5 seconds. After 2.5 seconds, the patient is going to receive a tidal volume of 400, and after 0.9 seconds, it's going to be cycling. That means that these breaths are going to be started by the machine and ended by the machine. But we also have, let me get my pointer. We also have the trigger, and that means that we are giving the patient the chance to get awake when it gets awake to trigger breaths. So in the case that the same breath that before were triggered by the machine can now be triggered by the patient. So we replace the word assist control by mandatory, and remember that I define a mandatory breath like those ones that could be triggered by the machine or by the patient, but they are always cycled by the machine after a time has elapsed or a certain volume has been delivered. So now we're going to replace the name AC, and we're going to be replacing by CMB. CMB, remember, that's the breathing sequence that is telling me that in that mode, all the breaths they're gonna be mandatory. And BC is the control variable. So in a certain way, we are creating the tag. If we choose a pressure control mode, the tag is gonna be PC CMB, and we use a volume control mode, the tag is gonna be BC CMB. Now it's very important to get to this point to define what is volume control. And I'm gonna say that not because we set a tidal volume in a mode, that means that we are controlling the volume. That is not right. In order for a mode to be volume control, we have to set the flow profile or the flow waveform. So those two things are necessary to say that a mode is a volume control. The machine will try to deliver, when you set the tidal volume and the flow shape, it's going to try to deliver the tidal volume with the flow shape you're going to be selected in such a way that the flow profile is pre-selected. If the patient wants more or less flow, the machine will not give it to the patient. And then when that happens, some people call it flow starvation. We call it work shifting. So this are the possible. Some bands don't give you the option to set any flow shape, but they have one already by default. And the most important thing, that the flow is not able to change from the values already preset. On the other side, we got pressure control. Pressure control, what the machine tried to do is reach the set pressure set by you or by the machine quickly and try to keep it nearly constant until the cycle variable has been reached. This pressure could be the same on the next breath, or could be higher or lower, depending on the targeting scheme. Another difference is going to be also an option, those pressure control, in which the pressure level is going to be variable moment to moment. It's not going to be any more square or rectangular. It's going to be variable moment to moment, because the pressure follows and amplifies a signal which is variable. That's why we see this kind of weird signal, weird flow shapes, and this is still volume control. Most that use this kind of variable pressure is going to be proportional assist ventilation, NAVA, and in a certain way, automatic tube compensation or tube compensation. Now we see that the patient that was passive before now is becoming active, and now our goal is going to be winning on comfort. So when I'm close to the patient to realize that the patient is active and struggling with the set inspiratory time of a CMB mode, what we usually do is a manual change of mode to the most popular spontaneous mode, which is pressure support. Pressure support, we all know it because we call it spontaneous mode. There's no respiratory rate, there's no set inspiratory time, and there's no set flow waveform. The waveform doesn't have to be a follow triangular. The flow can have whatever value it has. So that is the definition of a spontaneous breath. And this mode, pressure support, we say that is formed by only spontaneous breath. So the sequence of any spontaneous mode is going to be CSV. Remember that before I said that in volume control, we preset the flow waveform to a certain flow shape. And here I say that it's impossible to get a preset flow waveform. And all the mandatory breaths, they were controlled by pressure and volume. So we can think that we can now control the volume and the pressure on spontaneous breath, but it's absolutely impossible to control the volume during a spontaneous breath. Boiling control implies flow control, and spontaneous breath implies flow freedom. So the only possible control variable during any spontaneous breath is going to be pressure. We have a bunch of different modes. The control pressure, they are composed they are composed only of spontaneous breaths, so the sequence is going to be CSV, and they are pressure support, volume support, proportional assist ventilation, NAVA, automatic tube compensation, variable pressure support, and smart care. So we understand that these modes are not the same, but even though these modes, they share the same control variable, pressure, and the same breathing sequence, CSV. So what I'm trying to say now is that we need something else that describes the behavior of the mode, and so we can differentiate those modes that we're sharing the control scheme and the breathing sequence, and that is the targeting scheme. In the case of pressure support, the targeting scheme is set. Set means that you set the level of pressure support, and you come back 3 hours later, it's going to be the same level. Unless you manually adjust it, the machine is not going to do any setting. Volume support has an adaptive targeting scheme. That means that you give the machine the order to try to deliver a certain tidal volume, and the pressure is going to be adjusted up and down based on trying to achieve that tidal volume. Now we have proportional assist, NAV, and ATC, and now the pressure they have a targeting scheme called R, which is servo. That means that the pressure is going to be variable moment to moment. These moments share the same control variable, breathing sequence of CMB, and the same targeting scheme of R. So these are the modes that require the fourth criteria of discrimination to differentiate the signal they measure. For example, PAV measure the work done by P mask and try to adjust the pressure to keep the patient working on a certain level. NAVA measure the electrical activity of the diaphragm and adjust the pressure to keep the EDI at a certain level. An automatic tube compensation compensate for the artificial airway, so the decay of the tracheal pressure is compensated, and the pressure that we can see that we set on the vent is going to be at the trach level. These are the modes that requires the fourth criteria of discrimination. And people are going to say, well, but they are not the same mode. We know, how can the taxonomy say that it's the same mode? Look, they all control pressure, the pressure is variable moment to moment, and they all have a targeting scheme. The signal they measure is what makes the difference between these three modes. Later, you have variable pressure support that has a targeting scheme by a variable, which is a pressure support that is randomly adjusting to mimic the random variability of normal breathing. And we got smart care. We use an intelligent targeting scheme that self-adjusts the level of pressure support, trying to keep the patient breathing in a certain defined zone according to the disease. And finally, can even start winning and doing a spontaneous breathing trial and suggest extubation. We can see that now the real concept of the targeting scheme. The targeting scheme, it let us describe modes that share the same control variable breathing sequence in a way that describes the modes and we can understand the behavior of the mode. Long time ago, we used to use an intermediate mode called SIMB between any CMB mode and any CSV mode. Note, like now I'm referring to CMB modes generically, to those modes that they are composed of mandatory breaths that we use initially to serve the goal of safety because they have a backup respiratory rate, and the modes I'm referring generically to the CSV, to those modes composed of spontaneous breaths, which have a variable flow rate and they don't have any set high time, and we use in the winning. So this is something that the taxonomy in a certain way can let us refer and group those modes independent. In this case, I can say CMB mode, and I don't have to refer to the control variable. The mode SIMB that we were using intermediately was used as a way to go from mandatory to spontaneous breaths, and that was used a long time ago. SIMB, as I said before, is composed of spontaneous and mandatory breaths together. So at this present time, every single mode could be synchronized, so we remove the IMB. It's a very important thing that you guys, I know that you're going to associate, whenever you see IMB, you're going to associate it with the mode SIMB. Try to remove that from your head, because so far, IMB, we are defining a sequence which is composed of mandatory and spontaneous breath, and in which the SIMB mode represents one of the variations of IMB. At the present time, we have identified 5. As IMB is composed of mandatory and spontaneous breath, we know that the mandatory breath could be pressure control or volume control, and the spontaneous breath, obviously, we don't have to remark the control variable because we know it's going to be pressure control. The mode SIMB was used as an intermediate mode, and I remember on one of my first jobs that I got a plastified card that said decrease the mandatory breath every 2 hours until you get to a low rate and go to pressure support. Well, in 1995, a study done by Dr. Andres Esteban in Spain discovered that by doing this, we were lengthening the weaning process. So by doing this, I mean, this publication was, I would say, the nail in the coffin of IMB, or the mode SIMB, and this present time has a very bad reputation, although the mode IMB is still used. So new modes has tried to prevent that intermediate transition from IMB, and they are making the transition automatically. Now the modes, which are forms of IMB, they can identify what the patient is triggering and transition the mode from mandatory breath to a spontaneous breath. So the goal is, as the patient triggers and is ready to be weaned, the patient is going to be triggering spontaneously for comfort and weaning. But if by any chance the patient becomes apneic or gets sedated and the tribe gets depressed, mandatory breaths, they're going to be reintroduced as a way to compensate for the decrease on the minute ventilation. Because of the different interactions between mandatory and spontaneous breath, we identified, and I'm only going to refer to 3 forms of IMB. On IMB type 1, the spontaneous breath happens in the middle of the mandatory breaths, and they don't have any influence over the respiratory rate of the mandatory breaths. Only you manually can decrease the rate of the mandatory breaths. In the second time, IMB type 2, when the patient starts breathing, it's gonna transition from CMB to CSB, from mandatory to spontaneous breath. The I time is gonna be removed in favor of a variable inspiratory time. And the patient is going to be breathing spontaneously as long as the total of the observed respiratory rate is going to be over the set mandatory rate. If by any chance the case, the mode going to start re-entering mandatory breath, redelivering mandatory breath with the goal to try to restore the minimum respiratory rate. And IMB type 3 is based on the minute ventilation. The patient, as soon as triggered, going to go to spontaneous breath, as long as the observed minute ventilation is going to be over the set 1. When it starts decaying, the mode going to start delivering mandatory breaths with the goal of trying to restore the minimum minute ventilation. Because of these modes are composed of mandatory and spontaneous breath, even though you see the transition faster and maybe you don't see any other mandatory breath anymore, that's why they are considered IMB. We got on one side, CMB is only mandatory breath, no spontaneous present, CSB only spontaneous breath, no mandatories, and IMB, there could be a combination or existence of mandatory and spontaneous breath, even if that coexistence is going to be for a short period of time. So now we're going to start seeing how the family tree of the ventilatory modes is created and the tag is created. So we got the 2 families based on the control variable, and we know how the tag is created by BC on the modes that belongs to the family of volume control, and PC on the modes that they belong to the family of pressure control. Later on, we drop below the different breathing sequence. We see on the right a mode that is controlled by volume, composed of mandatory breath, and the sequence is going to be BC, CMB, a mode that is controlled by volume on the mandatories, and the mode is going to be BC, IMB. We obviously see that volume cannot be the control variable on CSV, so the combination volume control and CSV is impossible. On the other side, we can see pressure CMB, most composed, the mandatory breath is controlled by pressure. Another IMB, where the mandatory breath of the IMB is going to be controlled by pressure. Obviously, the spontaneous is going to be controlled by pressure, and CSV obviously is going to be controlled by pressure. So this is how the tags are being created. But many modes share this kind of combination, so we still need further description. And the further description is going to come by the control scheme. Here you can see the 5 milli of the modes, and look at the majority of the lines are in blue. The reason is because, remember that I told you that volume control is flow preset. So most of the volume control modes are used initially. When the patient start getting active, it's going to be conflicted, a fixed flow offer is going to start conflicting with a variable inspiratory demand. So we switch the mode, we liberate the flow by switching to a pressure control mode. So this is the reason, because pressure control mode implies free flow, is that because all the modes finally, on the evolution of the modes, comes on the side of the pressure control mode. Targeting schemes. Targeting schemes are 7, are set point, dual, servo, bivariable, adaptive, optimal, and intelligent. We usually represent it in a lowercase, and I'm going to try to explain some of them quickly if I have the time. Let me drink some water. Explaining the targeting scheme sometimes could be something a little bit complicated to understand. I did my best part when we were talking about CSV modes. We know that the pressure control further differentiates the mode, but in this case, I got 3 graphics. We know that in this side, we know that the control variable in the 3 of them is pressure control. We only see mandatory breaths, so we assume that the breathing sequence is CMB. I don't see any spontaneous breath in the middle. In these 3 graphics, the patient is totally passive. So the point is that many graphics are going to look alike when the patient is totally passive. If we see the first graphic, we know that the modes, what we call popularly as a pressure assist control, and the tag is going to be PCCMBS. The mode that before look alike by sharing the same control variable and the same breathing sequence, the fact that we know that it has S means that the level of pressure is going to be the same unless I change it manually. The only mission of the vent is going to be trying to achieve the set pressure, and in the next breath is going to be the same pressure, and in the next breath is going to be the same pressure. There's no change. Everything is set. The same mode that look like the same, that we're controlling the same pressure control variable and was composed of mandatory breath, now we know that has an adaptive targeting scheme. This mode in a passive patient with stable mechanics is going to look alike. It's the same pressure and everything, but when the fact that I know that it's adaptive, when the patient starts getting active or when mechanics start changing, we're going to see that the mode now has the capacity to adjust the pressure, trying to achieve the desired goal of delivering or trying to deliver a target tidal volume. We can see how the targeting scheme help us to differentiate modes that originally look alike and they have different behaviors. In essence, the targeting scheme is telling you how the mode is going to behave, what is going to happen. It's going to be introducing, it's going to be changing the pressure, going to have more automatic decisions or not. It's a more descriptive information that let us differentiate modes. And the last one that I put on purpose, the last one, even though it looked like a CMB mode, pressure control CMB mode, it ended up that it's an IMB mode. Every time we see IMB, we need to realize that the mode can allow spontaneous and mandatory breath, mandatory and spontaneous breath together. And we can see the number 3. Remember that we talk about those modes when the patient breathes spontaneously and increase the minute ventilation over the set, they're going to be all the breaths spontaneous. But if the breath decrease below the set minute ventilation or the minute ventilation goal, mandatory ventilation is going to be delivered. And this is the targeting scheme, optimal and intelligent, optimal and intelligent. For mandatory, this is the target from the mandatory, and the same targeting scheme from the spontaneous breath. Here, the patient is passive, so the mode looks pretty passive, but when the patient is getting awake, we can see that the pressure is self-adjusting. Ideally, ASV is an evolution, is the big brother of the evolution of an adaptive pressure controller. But it not only do that, but also has the capacity to change from mandatory to spontaneous and to reintroduce mandatory breaths. Now you're going to see why we classified ASV as a form of IMB, more precisely IMB type 3. I have to acknowledge that I didn't do a mistake, but it wasn't very accurate, because in this mode, tube compensation is activated. When tube compensation is activated, we need to put the R here, but I didn't want to complicate the tag. But we can see that now how important it is that mode that look alike. If by any chance we have the possibility to see the tag of the mode, we know that it's not a CMB mode, and we know how the mode is going to be behavior when it starts interacting with the patient. This is a nice table that, for example, I work with the Puritan Bennett, Servo Use, and Hamilton C6 and Hamilton T1 for transport. We know that BC plus, PRVC, APV-CMB, or another way to name it or to configure the mode as CMB plus, APV-CMB plus, share the same tag. So it seems like since they share the same tag, all these modes are equivalent modes. They are the same mode. So if I need to change a machine and I need to find the equivalent mode in another one, if I'm using BC plus, I need to go for APV or this mode on the Hamilton. On the other side, if I'm using auto mode pressure control in a Servo U and I want to switch to another ventilator like the Hamilton, I know that the same mode is going to be produced when I activate Pysync on pressure SIMB. And I know that because they share the same code. Funny thing is, like, if I want to transport somebody which is in volume control assist control, which is BC CMBS, which is offered by the Puritan Bennett, and I want to use the Hamilton T1 for transport, look what happened. The Hamilton doesn't have any volume control mode. So we'll have to find a mode that is capable of offering a target tidal volume, which is a form of BCCMB8 or PRVC or APV-CMB. That's the only option. Having these kind of tables or having the application, the bend mode map, is going to make it easier for you to understand, for example, how PSMB behaves when Pysync is on, or trying to get those cryptic names that sometimes is weird on bends you don't use or you don't understand. But it's very important in order to understand all those applications and everything, you need to understand the tags, how they are elaborated and how they work. One of the benefits of the taxonomy of the modes here, remember that we talk about pressure regulated volume control as a ugly, bad defined mode or wrongly defined mode. Just by seeing the tag, I can see that the control variable is not volume control like the machine says. It's pressure control. It's composed of mandatory breaths, and it has an adaptive targeting scheme. It means that the pressure has the capacity to self-adjust up and down, trying to deliver the target tidal volume. Now we see the mode on the Draeger. The original mode was volume control assist control, which is classified as BC CMBS. Control variable is volume control, composed of mandatory breaths, and the set targeting scheme is set point. That means that same values of pressure of volume is going to be kept along the time. So suddenly we activated AutoFlow, and the tag changed to the tag now is PCCMBA. That means that just by activating AutoFlow on top of volume control, the control variable switch from volume control to pressure control. Now it's a pressure control mode. It's still composed of mandatory breaths, but the targeting scheme changed from set having the same target in every single breath. Now the target, the machine can adapt the pressure automatically, trying to deliver the tidal volume. We can see how we activated an AutoFlow. We still have very big display volume control, but the mode behavior is different because we have a different tag. And knowing the tag is telling me how the mode is going to be behaving. This is one of the worst options that's going to be opening eyes. Remember, volume control on the servo U, when you don't activate the flow adaptation, the tag is volume control CMB-S. The control variable is volume, composed of mandatory breath, and S means that the same target is going to be on every single volume control breath. We activate this flow adaptation, and look how the tag changed. The control variable is going to be volume control, but the mode changed from CMB to IMB. That means that, come on, what happened? Something, breath is supposed to be mandatory, now it's going to be spontaneous? Well, I didn't explain you the number 4. The number 4 means when a mandatory breath turns it into an spontaneous due to the patient requesting more flow from the beginning to the end. And the targeting scheme is not going to be set anymore, it's going to be dual. Dual means that the mode has the capacity to recognize when the patient is needing more flow and changes the control variable here from volume and liberates the flow by switching to pressure support as long as the patient requires the flow. So that's the reason because this mode is classified in that way. And you're gonna see it on the next slide. This was me on the using the servo I on a real patient. This volume control option of adaptive flow was activated. The patient is passive, and you can see how the flow control has a typical flow shape, rectangular with a little delay on the rise at the beginning of the flow, and I don't see any patient activity. Suddenly, the patient is requesting, no, on this one is fine. Here, the patient is doing an effort, drops the pressure, and the vent switches the control variable from volume to pressure. It switches from volume control to pressure support, and now the machine cycles by pressure. You can see how the I time is extended, and you can see how high the tidal volume is. And the reason, because we classify it as an IMB, look at this here. This spread that's supposed to be rectangular, it was changed from beginning to the end to a pressure support breath because the patient makes such a large effort from beginning to the end that the vent made the switch, the control variable from the beginning to the end and turn a mandatory breath, volume control breath, into a spontaneous breath. This is the reason because this mode is classified as a form of IMB. As a matter of fact, you are seeing the graphic that made me realize that there was a fourth variation of IMB. And the targeting scheme is dual because now the control variable could change, in this case, from volume to pressure. There are other dual control modes in which the control variable can switch from pressure to, let's say, volume, like a volume assured pressure support. And again, you can see how this mode, that's supposed to look like here, it has nothing to do. I mean, if we see this mode in a passive patient and we don't know the tag, we're gonna ignore the capacity of the mode. A regular volume control wouldn't be able to do that. That's why it is important to know the tags and for the manufacturer to properly communicate the capacities of the mode. In a few words, I can understand that the taxonomy can sound a little complex, all the different kind of tags and everything, but we are not doing anything more than trying to describe the complexity introduced by the manufacturers in the modes when they start doing weird things. Our work is try to describe it and represent it into tags so we can all understand it. This is the mode on the Hamilton C6. Pysync wasn't turned on. We can see that the mode is composed of mandatory breaths and spontaneous in the middle. This is a typical pressure control IMB type 1 SS. Control variable is pressure. IMB type 1 means that the spontaneous spread happening between the mandatories, but their presence has no alteration over the set respiratory rate. And the targeting scheme is set because it's the same level of pressure for all the pressure control breaths, and the pressure support is going to have the same level of pressure. Later on, we activated Pysync, and we realized that there is a mandatory breath, and later on, all the breaths are spontaneous. The machine here doesn't tell me anything, doesn't alert me that the Pysync was off and the mode has been changed. So, but if you are an eager observer and you have a rate of 12, that means that one mandatory breath should be delivered every 5 seconds. We see that there is no mandatory breath here. Remember that IMB, the tag changed from IMB type 1 to IMB 2. That means that now the person of spontaneous breath abolishes the mandatory breath. And as long as, in this case, the rate is over 12, no mandatory breath is going to be reintroduced. But if the rate decays below 12, the machine is going to start delivering mandatory breaths. Same modes with the same kind of behavior is the BiPAP ST and auto mode pressure control, pressure support. They are all different. They are all forms of IMB type 2. Now remember that I mentioned that PRVC and PRVC on PRVC in the servo U and PRVC in the Nihon Kon are different modes. Well, they are different modes because they have different tags. The tag of the PRVC on the servo U is PCCMBA. Is a pressure control mode composed of mandatory breaths with an adaptive targeting scheme. And now we can see that the real tag on the Nihon Kon is PC IMB type 2 AA. That means that the mode it goes from mandatory to a spontaneous based on the respiratory rate, and mandatory are reintroduced based on the respiratory rate. And the targeting scheme of the mandatory is going to be adaptive, and then the spontaneous is going to be adaptive. That means that the mandatory rate is going to be going up and down, trying to deliver the set tidal volume, and the same going to happen to the mode that is going to be trying to deliver the pressure support breaths. It's going to be like a mode composed of PRVC and volume support. These are some kind of examples of how the tags are created. Volume control CMBS. This is the mode composed of volume control. The control variable is volume composed of mandatory breaths, and the targeting scheme is S. The next mode is the control variable is pressure control. It's composed of mandatory breaths, and this targeting scheme is still S. Means that the pressure and the volume target is going to be the same, but it's going to be the same for every single breath. Now we have the targeting scheme change on the mode, and now it's A, and we're going to see that now it's going to be the same level. The level of pressure has the capacity to go up and down. Now we're going to see a mode composed of spontaneous breath. Obviously, the control variable is going to be pressure, and the targeting scheme is S. This is like pressure support. We're going to see S means that the level of pressure support is going to be the same for every single breath unless we manually change. Suddenly, we here is the same, pretty much the same tag, but the A is telling us that volume support has the capacity to try to adjust the pressure up and down, and it's called volume support. It's trying to reach a certain specific pressure. And the fourth one is the mode ATC nav and proportional assist that requires 4 criteria that remarks the signal they measure. But up to that, they are all pressure control, composed of spontaneous breath, and with a targeting scheme of servo, meaning that the level of pressure is adjusted moment to moment. The signal, either PMAS, EDI, or the resistance of the tube, is the one that's going to differentiate in a 4th step the modes. These are for IMB. For IMB, remember that we have mandatory and spontaneous breath, and we have to select the targeting scheme for both. Here, the mandatory breath is going to be, of IMB is going to be, the control variable is going to be pressure. Has a set targeting scheme. We don't have to identify the variable pressure of the mode spontaneous for the spontaneous breath, because we know it's going to be pressure, and the set targeting scheme is for the same. Here we get the same mode, in this case variable, it's pressure control on the mandatory, and pressure support is obviously on the spontaneous. and both going to have the same targeting scheme. Here, pressure control IMB type 1 AS means that the mandatory has an adaptive targeting scheme and the spontaneous has a set targeting scheme. We know this mode as PRVC IMB plus pressure support. And the rest of the modes are pretty much PCIMB type 2 AA, represent the most auto-mode PRVC to volume support, ABAPs, and now PRVC on the knee home column. ASB is PCIMB3, optimal and intelligent. I didn't speak too much optimal and intelligent. On ASB, you set a certain minute ventilation target, and the machine, the targeting scheme, in an optimal way, gonna try to find the best combination of respiratory rate and target tidal volume that gonna make the patient spend the less amount of energy while working. I'm getting a little bit without saliva. And well, we got to this almost, I think we are reaching the end. We have so different machines, and it's easy to do mistakes. They all comes with different names, different modes, different options that can change modes. So we need to understand how every single machine knows. And if we don't know, that's when the utility of the vent mode map comes, because it can help you to understand or to find the modes. And I remember we were talking about Kasmarek. Kasmarek in 2015, he wrote that the RT and beyond must be a technical expert on every aspect of the mechanical ventilator. They should be able to discuss all the technical nuances of the mechanical ventilator. They should be able to compare the capabilities of one ventilator to the other. They should be able to discuss in detail the mechanisms of action of all the modes and adjuncts that exist on the mechanical ventilator. Well, we are on 2025, and 10 years after, I would say that we are far away from it, and hopefully one day we're going to be closer. But I think that the only means that is going to be understanding and get closer to this desire or wish of Kasmarek is going to be through the taxonomy of the modes. I don't know if I make you tired. This is a slide that usually is very ample. It demonstrates how at the beginning of when we intubate somebody, the goal is safety. We need to provide the minimum minute ventilation, and we use what we call CMV modes, modes composed of mandatory breaths. At the most basic level, the minute ventilation is provided by a combination of respiratory rate and tidal volume. At the more advanced level, we set the target, and the ventilation decides how to achieve the target. On the other extent, we see all the most CSV modes, all the most composed spontaneous breath, that we use before extubated. In the middle, we can use modes from the beginning to the end, which are these modes, which represent the evolution of all the modes, and these modes are composed of mandatory breaths and spontaneous breath together. The goal of this method, which could be used as is ISV, mandatory minute ventilation, IntelliVent, they could use at the beginning because they're gonna serve the goal of safety by providing the minimum minute ventilation. As long as the patient is breathing spontaneously, they're gonna make a progression faster than us that we have to do it manually, and gonna transition to a mode with composed of spontaneous breath. When we switch a mode from a mandatory mode to a spontaneous mode, we are liberating the inspiratory time, and we are getting closer to the natural variability of the respiratory drive. The worst restriction going to be happening in a volume control mode with an active patient, and these modes have the capacity to recognize that and switch to a spontaneous mode in a certain way that they're going to liberate the flow and they're going to liberate the eye time in favor of the variability of spontaneous breath. These modes, which are the most advanced, let's call it ASB, where they know IntelliVent, they could be used from beginning to the end. And while we were using the previous modes, if we are far away and busy, we don't recognize when the patient is struggling, trying to go to pressure support with the same time, with the same inspiratory time, because we are busy, and we can manually make the transition, but it's going to take longer. All the time we delay, the patient is going to be struggling with the same inspiratory time. When the most advanced modes, they do it automatically. They have a response much faster and more predictable than any operator at bedside, because we cannot be all the time at bedside. I guess I ran out of juice. That's the end of the presentation.
Yes.
Thank you very, very much, Ariel. I think you managed, you have 300 people waiting for 2 hours, and I think if you continue another hour, we will still be here. It was very enjoyable. It was very informative. Thank you very much.
I'm sorry if I must put many people to sleep, honestly. Because this is a very, very, when I start talking, I lost conscious of time.
No, actually, it was very amusing. A very nice lecture, and this taxonomy is a breakthrough in the ventilation era. But I have a question for you, or a comment. I don't know if it's a question or a
Sure.
comment. There are many misnomers in the mechanical ventilation field. Misnomers that have been deeply embedded in the mind of the practice and the industry terminology. Do you think it's likely that we will or paraphrase or correct these misnomers, or they will be just like this, even in the modes, not only in the mode terminology, but in everything in the mechanical ventilation, you will find a deeply embedded misnomer. I don't know
Yeah,
what's the solution of this.
There are things that you're going to be changing. So some people, they are very close-minded. They are not willing to change or to reevaluate the way they have learned things. So sometimes there's nothing you can do. Sadly, those people are going to be promoting wrong terminology or wrong concepts. I think that the goal is to try to work with those minds that could be teachable, that could be upgradable. So, and at the same time, it's like I said, do not accept anything. Do not accept the taxonomy because it's the taxonomy. What you have to do, guys, is read it, chew it, question it, and if after all that process makes sense to you, adopt it. And like I said, taxonomy is something that is evolving, and I'm pretty sure that some definitions could be changed, could be much better expressed, but there are things that we are not going to change. And like I said before, I wish the industry could cooperate with us, at least trying to refer all the pressure to the same reference point, or at least trying to do something. The point is like they are not doing anything. So the Cleveland Clinic elaborated this kind of benchmark map to serve an international language because people reject to speak the same language.
I think one day it will be mandatory to have the tag under each name, so everybody can know it. Like it's like the trademark is something, and the tag must be obligatory.
Yeah, like I said, there's a local language. If you use one ventilator in one institution and you don't have problems with the modes, please call it whatever name you like in your institution. But if when you publish a study and want to talk to another people or publish to another people, they don't use your ventilator, please give them a tool to try to understand and avoid any misunderstanding about the modes being used. I don't know how long was this second talk. Did I pass the hour or?
1 minute and it will be an hour. That's
I didn't prepare to do the whole thing. I only prepared for 20 minutes. That's why I ended up adding things and I didn't have time to properly check if they altogether make sense.
I personally enjoyed it very much, and I'm looking forward for future lectures, the same pattern and examples for that. I think it would be
I
very.
mean, it's nice, but I think you guys need to get the father of all the taxonomy, not the junior. And the fathers, you're gonna get to I would say either get Rob Chadbourne or Eduardo Morales. But I mean, I'm trying to do my best. That's why in the disclaimer, I put that I got my way to explain the taxonomy. My way of explaining taxonomy, I try to make it easier for the bedside care practitioner. But either Rob or Dr. Morales could have a different approach, which is not totally, it's not incorrect, or mine is not incorrect. There are different ways, and that's why I decided to put in the disclaimer that another co-authors might explain it differently, and that's why this is my way of explaining it.
Dr. Muhammad, do we have any time for any questions? Or I'm searching for the questions. Everybody is happy.
Oh,
Some-
and people must be sleeping already.
No, they're still writing it in Q&A. I think for the questions, if there's any, I think we can pass it for you. If there's any specific questions, we'll answer separately or others. And
Yeah, no problem. I mean,
Dr.
if you
Muhammad,
Yes, I think we can have something like a question and answer session one day, because this is a very important topic. But actually, I think most of us enjoyed and get used to this.
Yeah. I'm seeing some of the questions. Do you want me to answer them now if
Yes,
I
yes,
can? Or
it's okay. It's okay. Yes.
okay, let me get let's start by the okay, Sam is asking me for a patient said on volume control continuous mandatory ventilation, BCCMB specify the control variable, breath sequence, and targeting scheme according to the ventilator taxonomy. Well, the taxonomy is going to be BCCMBS if the option of extra flow is not activated because it's a set point. Second, how would pressure support ventilation be classified using the modern taxonomy? The control variable is pressure control. The sequence is CSV because all the breaths are spontaneous, and the targeting scheme is S because of SET. The level of pressure support is going to be the same. Another question is a post-op patient shows asynchronous PRVC. Explain how the taxonomy framework fails identify on correct this issue. Well, the taxonomy, it doesn't tell you how to apply the modes. The taxonomy is only tell you how the mode decompose and work. It's describing you the tools you're going to be using. How to apply the tool comes after. The taxonomy is teaching you the tools you got available, how to use it, and when things change, how to select different tools to do the job. But I can tell you that the most like PRVC, if the patient generates a larger tidal volume, the vent is going to interpret that the mechanics are improving and going to start winning the pressure down when the opposite is needed. So ventilators don't have brains so far. That's why I put a slide that you have to think, and maybe PRVC is not the adequate mode, and you need to change the mode to one with a set point targeting scheme. How do ventilator taxonomy contribute to a patient safety and clinical efficiency? Well, you need to know the modes, how they are composed, and how they behave. And when the patient does something weird, like I described on PRVC, you can select the best mode with the best composition to be applied. It's not the same a volume control mode to a pressure control mode in an asthmatic patient, or knowing, for example, that the option of adaptive flow was activated and the patient is not, the tidal volume you were generating is going to be small, but it's going to be quite large. It's not the same. You need to be aware of the capacity of the mode. So asking about hyperventilation management, that's totally out of the taxonomy. What is a good CPAP or BiPAP in COPD? I got no idea about different options. How does misinterpretation of ventilator mode naming between different manufacturers affect patient safety? Well, it's the same if you change, for example, if you got the same volume control and you're trying to set a low tidal volume and suddenly the adaptive flow was open and the patient was activated and the patient is active, it's gonna be you can get large tidal volumes, so you lose the control of the tidal volume. Also, if you switch between two modes that have the same name but different targeting scheme, you could be doing a mistake because maybe you go from a mode composed of mandatory breath to a mode composed of spontaneous breath. You need to realize that the tags are telling you how the mode is going to be behaving, and that's going to affect the safety of the patient. The study we did on auto mode, we found out that the respiratory rate could be lower, and that's a safety issue, lower than the minimum that we set. Well, I guess I'm a little tired to keep on answering all the questions, but if I'm going to try to do my best on another opportunity.
Yes. So we will have another meeting, inshallah, Ariel. And thank you very much. Actually, I really myself enjoyed this lecture too much. It opened a field of question and answers, not only not answers only. So we will hope to have a next time, maybe 1 or 2 months later.
No problem. Just read as much as you can, and like I said, think it, question it, and accept it only if it makes sense to you.
Thank you very much, Ariel, and hope you enjoyed our day. And see you, inshallah, next webinar, inshallah.
Okay, shukran, sir. Have a wonderful night.
It was wonderful here too. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Let me leave.